All right. Welcome to episode 56 of Inappropriate Earl. Today's episode actually has no guest. This is another solo show, and we're going to just kind of go all over the place, starting off with my recap of UFC 185, which was actually one of the better cards recently. You know, if you're a UFC MMA fan, you know that the UFC has most of the top fighters in the world under contract, so they have to have a dozen cards a month just to justify keeping all these guys under salary. And so some of the cards aren't that good. And UFC 185 stood out. You know, like last week's card with Ronda Rousey, it was really just one good fight on the card, and then the rest were fights that, 5 or 6 years ago would have been on the prelims. And the one good fight in that fight was over in 14 seconds. So I'm one of the people who paid $60 for it. So I got my money's worth on Saturday's card because every fight was good. Even the preliminary fights were good. And rarely will you see a fight on the early prelims affect a fight on the main card. And I think we saw that when Anthony Pettis' brother, Sergio Pettis, was dominating the fight with Ryan Benoit. And Benoit, like can happen at any point in any fight, took down Pettis and beat him, knocked him out. And they had a camera of Anthony Pettis watching the fight, and you could literally see the air come out of the balloon. And, of course, later on in the main event, we'll go over that in a bit. I think what happened nobody could have predicted, which was a 5-round thrashing of Anthony Pettis by Rafael Dos Anjos, who started his UFC career off at like 4-4. So I don't think Dana White or anyone in the UFC would have ever have thought that Dos Anjos would have dominated the champion. But he did, and I was interested in this card mainly because, if you listen to Inappropriate Earl, and hopefully you do, that my love of the heavyweights is like my love of big tits. I just love me a good heavyweight fight. And we had one here in Roy Babyface Nelson against the Ream, Alistair Overeem. And we were not disappointed because we saw a slightly slimmer Alistair Overeem face I can't say a slightly slimmer Roy Nelson. That's like saying a skinny chick on The Biggest Loser, episode 1. And Roy Nelson, as Dana White said in the post-fight conference, is not human because he took some massive, massive knees from Overeem, who is a decorated kickboxing champion, K1 champion, Pride, and Strikeforce champion. Although his Strikeforce title kind of gets overvalued, or you might say undervalued, because he wasn't facing the greatest competition over there. I mean, when Brett Rogers is one of the people you've defeated, a lot of people are going to say, well, you weren't in the UFC, baby. So, and his UFC tenure, Overeem, that is, has been disappointing, I think. Massive knockout loss to Bigfoot Silva, and then a massive knockout loss to Travis Brown. He's now won 3 in a row, beating Struve, Mir, and Nelson. So I think they're trying to rehabilitate his image. When he came into the UFC, Overeem was thought, okay, this is the next champion. He had the look, and for those of you familiar with Overeem, you'll see a slight physique transformation. In 2003 when he fought Chuck Liddell in Pride, he literally looked like Roger from What's Happening. And now he looks like a black Lou Ferrigno. So a lot of rumors about how that physical transformation took place. And then he, the UFC is under fire for their, a lot of their top guys testing positive recently. Belfort, Anderson Silva, among others. And so I think Overeem fought clean in a couple of those losses and, was not the same fighter, clearly. I mean, in the Travis Brown fight specifically, I think he wilted after he unleashed an amazing barrage of kicks and punches to Brown, and Brown got up and took it. And a lot of people speculated that maybe Overeem was not as strong as he used to be. Read into that what you will. But he appears to be back after changing camps. He was with the Black Zillions down in Florida, and he is now with Craig Jackson's camp in New Mexico. And he seems to be a smarter fighter for sure under Jackson. With the Black Zillions, he would just go all out for 45 seconds to 2 minutes, gas out, and then, guys would take advantage of that. And I think the change has actually helped him, although his time with the Black Zillions was marred in somewhat controversy because he caused a very serious knee injury to one of their better prospects. And Anthony Johnson said he would love to fight Overeem at one point because Overeem was basically, according to Johnson, kind of a dick and a bad training partner. And, you haven't heard that from the Jackson camp. So, I think a good Overeem is definitely beneficial to the heavyweight division because, if you look at the heavyweight division, it's actually pretty good, in my opinion. I mean, you've got a lot of good fighters, although some of them are what might be considered out of their prime. Josh Barnett is, I think, at number 6, Arlovsky. These are guys who fought in Pride and Affliction. So, they've been around the block, and Mark Hunt is, I think, might be number 5. He is certainly in contention. He's got a fight with Miocic coming up. Of course, there's a fight in Poland, I think, this next month with Krokop back in the promotion, fighting Gonzaga. So, we got a resurgent Todd Duffy in the mix now. And, so there's a lot of good fights to be made. And it'll be interesting to see where Overeem, who his next opponent is. I think Dana White would love to have him up against Dos Santos. Those two guys have a bit of a history. And, I think they got to be careful with Overeem, though, because he does kind of have a weak chin. If you put him in there against those, what he did against Nelson, which I thought was crazy, was there was 2 times where he had his back to the cage and he would let Nelson tee off on him, almost doing the rope-a-dope. I don't know what the proper terminology for that in the octagon is. The octadope. And I thought he was crazy for doing that because Nelson was landing some bombs, but Overeem, for once in his life, had his hands up and defending quite nicely. And, you do that against Dos Santos or Miocic or, one of the best, Mark Hunt, Overeem's head is going to be flying around the world, separated from his body, of course, unless he starts eating shark meat again. But so it's good to see Overeem back. Another fight on the card was Johnny Hendricks against the immortal Matt Brown. Great fight. Hendricks looked to be in great shape. You could actually see his abs for once. And, Matt Brown, very, very tough dude. But Hendricks just seems to be motivated to get back his title, which now Robbie Lawler has. And Lawler's got a fight with Rory McDonald in Montreal, I think. I would love to see McDonald do a title fight outside of Canada, but it seems like they're kind of rooting for McDonald. But and I think Hendricks will get the winner of that fight, and it'll probably be in Quebec, I'm guessing. I would love to see that fight in Texas, but Hendricks is hungry, looks healthy. I don't know where Matt Brown goes from here. He's almost like the Frank Mir of this division, kind of the gatekeeper. He's a good guy to get a win over, but not sure, what they do with him now. And, that division's pretty good right now. A lot of good fights. And I'll tell you the fight that really got me going, wow, was the Esparza Jedrzejczyk fight. We'll just call her, I don't know what's a good name to call her. That's JJ. We'll call her JJ because that last name's crazy. She dominated the champion, Carla Esparza, and just a 2-round thrashing of the champion, which is rare. And I think the thoughts going into this fight was that Carla Esparza would, with her superior wrestling skills, would just take the fight to the ground and beat the striker. But she never got the opportunity. And, the total strikes were 55-6. And what's even more telling is the significant strikes were 53-4. And Esparza she did get one takedown, so we'll give her that. But, I think they were kind of grooming Esparza to be like the, ethnic Rousey, if you will, of, good looking, kind of a cocky shit talker. And this Polish girl just, it was literally like watching a Taibo instructor fight, a seasoned boxer. It was just like, wow, how is Esparza? Esparza must share some DNA with Roy Nelson because she took some major bombs and she didn't quit. Kind of reminded me of when Mike Tyson was fighting Razor Ruddock, and Tyson was just landing these bombs and Ruddock would just stay there and take it. But, at the end of the day, I think we have a new star in the women's division. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't know how many great fights there are in the strawweight division. There's although it's a new division, this could be one where, you have 5 champions in 2 years. You just don't know a lot about these girls and what they can do until they fight each other. So I'm sure Esparza will be back in the mix, but she's got a lot of work to do. Her striking defense wasn't the best, and JJ was just awesome to watch. Just picking a very good MMA fighter apart, making her look like an amateur. And then we have the main event. Anthony Showtime Pettis, seemingly unbeatable champion. He made quick work of Gilbert Melendez last fight. And, Dos Anjos, just a 5-round thrashing. And like I said, when we started, I don't know if Anthony's little brother Sergio's loss affected him mentally, but I've never seen a guy look, not clueless, but he definitely looked like he had no answer for Dos Anjos. The strikes were, pretty even, but 144 to 96, but the significant strikes were 90 to 54. So Dos Anjos just was relentless. And where the fight was won, I think, is 9 takedowns for Dos Anjos, 0 for Anthony Pettis. And that's 9 takedowns out of 10 attempts. So it's kind of like the John Jones-Cormier fight. If you were to say Jones was going to take Cormier down 5 times, I'd be like, you're crazy. So if you were to tell me Dos Anjos was going to take Pettis down, I wouldn't say that's unbelievable. But I certainly wouldn't say it was going to happen with a 90% accuracy rate. So, I think the UFC is definitely probably a little bummed out, because I think they were kind of grooming Pettis to be like, their next star, their next marketable star with his obviously good looks and his heritage. But they got a little blip in the radar there because, although Dos Anjos is a great fighter, he's not the greatest looking guy, and his English isn't great, so that's kind of hard to market to the American audience. But we'll see what happens, and I'm sure a rematch is. I don't know if he'll get the immediate rematch, and because I think Donald Cerrone has something to say about that if he wins his next fight, and I guess I missed the first bout on the main card. Chris Carriazo against Henry Cejudo. That was kind of another squash match as well. Cejudo just dominated. 111 total strikes to 41. Significant strikes 50 to 22. Takedowns 6 to 0. I think Carriazo just, did not look very well. Didn't seem to have an answer for anything. So that's another fight that was kind of won in dominating fashion. Really all bouts on the main card were not blowouts necessarily. I think Overeem's fight, you could say he dominated Nelson, but you always had the feeling that Nelson, I would say, out of all the cards on the main all the fights on the main card, you could say Nelson was always kind of in it because even at the end of the fight, he landed an overhand right that knocked Overeem down, and you had the feeling that if there was one more minute left in the fight, Nelson could have won it because we all know Overeem's historically weak chin. And I don't know. Sometimes I think that's unfair to say that anyone in the heavyweight division has a weak chin because you're talking, guys who, weigh between 230 and the limit is 265. But on the night of the fight, a lot of these guys toward the higher end of that limit are probably 275, 280. A guy like Bigfoot Silva, Mark Hunt, are pretty fueled up by fight night. In between the weigh-ins and the fight, they probably put on 10 pounds. So I don't think it's, in a way, I'm arguing with myself. You get hit by anyone who's 240 to 280 pounds, you're probably going to go down. But some guys seem to be able to have the ability to take shots better. Roy Nelson took probably at least 5 to 6 knees, Overeem knees, which are different than most knees in the heavyweight division, and just kept walking forward, which is pretty impressive. And he took several huge kicks to the liver and stomach area that didn't seem to affect him. And, we all remember the Brock Lesnar-Overeem fight where one kick to the liver and Lesnar went down quicker than Tower 2 on 9/11. So, just to indicate, how hard those kicks are. So, the other fights were pretty pretty dominant in how they were won. And of course, there was one other heavyweight fight on the FX prelims, Jared Rosholt and Josh Copeland, and that was kind of a weird fight because they're friends and sometime training partners, and they didn't really seem to want to engage. And Rocholt's great wrestling background, but very powerful. And he, I guess you'd say, dominated Copeland. I don't know who Copeland's ab coach is. I think it's Fedor, because he looked like he swallowed a barrel or something. But he's got tremendous knockout power. But these are, I guess you'd say, heavyweight prospects, and so it's always good to get some. I don't know, wouldn't necessarily say younger guys, but the guys who don't have a lot of MMA miles on them. And Rocholt's a guy to, I think, watch out for, because he is, got a great wrestling base, and very, very heavy-handed puncher, and he had a big gap in total strikes and significant strikes and takedowns. So he's someone to watch out for. I mean, Copeland, he's definitely a guy you could throw in to a main card fight, and it would look impressive if you beat him, because he's a big guy. But his cardio, I don't know, he seemed to gas out toward the end there. And, I think Rochold didn't necessarily let up on him, but I think if they weren't friends, this could have ended a lot sooner. It's always tough to see those fights where they're friends. I remember that one fight with Mir and who was a Crow Cop. It looked like a fucking sparring session. They're shaking hands in between punches and hugging each other when they would take each other down. It's like that's why I kind of do want to see Overeem and Dos Santos, because those guys are definitely two alpha males, and they don't like each other, but we'll see what happens there. So I think the next fight, there's so many fights to keep up with. Now we hit a couple cards though, where it's I don't know. I mean, like, the next fight is a UFC fight night in Rio. Damian Maia has the main fight, headlining fight, and poor old Josh Koscheck is fighting Eric Silva. Last time you saw Koscheck in the ring, it looked like he swallowed a load by Peter North. He was foaming at the mouth. And then the rest of the card is just a lot of Brazilian dudes and chicks, although these two chicks look like dudes. But hey, they could probably beat my ass. So, Amanda Nunes, and against kind of a legendary female fighter, Shayna Baszler. So, I'm not too excited about this card, to be completely honest with you. And, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every card has to be like UFC 185 where you're into every fight. But, and then next card after that is Gonzaga against Crow Cop in Poland. And, I'm kind of excited about that card just because of that event. The rest of the card is, suspect at best, in my opinion. And then you have another card in April that's I'm a little more excited about that because it's Machida and Rockhold. I love Luke Rockhold, but in full disclosure, I am a Strikeforce nutswinger, if you will, because I love those Strikeforce guys, and Kennedy, Rockhold, Cormier, Bigfoot Silva, Overeem, Dan Henderson, Babalu, Mayhem Miller, who's been hanging out at the Comedy Store lately, which is kind of funny. Nice guy, but he's walking around with this look in his eyes like he could explode at any minute. So, it's kind of a uneasy feeling when he's up there because the security guys, they know who he is, and they're like, we can't take him. And so, but he's a cool guy. And UFC Fight Night, April 18th, Machida Rockhold. You've also got Souza and Romero, that's a good fight. And then Swanson and Holloway is a good fight. And you've got Jim Miller fighting. I always love watching him. And then another card. I'm kind of not. I don't know why I keep saying card. Another fight I'm kind of looking forward to is Ovens St. Preux against Patrick Cummins. A lot of people. They kind of put down Patrick Cummins because Cormier killed him. But, he took the fight on short notice and, and kind of ballsy to do it. But he's been pretty dominating in every one of his other fights. Great wrestling, and so that's a kind of a good card, I think. And then you have UFC 186, Dillashaw against Barao 2. You got Demetrius Johnson fighting, Bisping and Dalloway fighting. I'm kind of excited about that. Cote and Riggs. You've got no heavyweights on this card. Davis and Kaufman. I like that. And also a fight that I'm very interested in is, I almost said Greg Jackson, but Rampage Jackson against Fabio Maldonado. And if you've ever watched Maldonado fight, you'll know that this guy can take punishment, and just the balls on this guy. When one of the recent cards was in danger, I think it was the Miocic card. His opponent got injured. Maldonado stepped up to fight a heavyweight, and he got killed. But it was still, you appreciate the guy's balls of fighting one of the top heavyweights, and an amazing striker in Stipe Miocic. Fighting Mark Hudson, but Maldonado, is like a rock'em sock'em robot. He will take shots and just stand there in front of you. And Rampage, I don't know. I'm not. He's when you fought when you fought Kevin Randleman, you've been around. So I don't know how much gas he has left in the tank. But, I am looking forward to this fight, as well as the Bellator fight happening in June of a 51-year-old Ken Shamrock and Kimbo Slice. I mean, that's what I love about Bellator is that, with Scott Coker back in the mix, if you're Scott Coker, familiar with Scott Coker, you know that he ran Strikeforce. And Strikeforce had some great fights because they would give you matchups. Like they would put Dan Henderson in there against a slow, plodding person who would just come right at him, straight line. And you knew it was going to be a knockout, or, they wouldn't put they would almost have pro wrestling mismatches guaranteeing an exciting fight, and they'd give Fedor Brett Rogers, someone who they knew wasn't going to try and take Fedor down and would just kind of stand in front of him. And so you got a spectacular knockout, Bigfoot Silva against Fedor, neither guy would try and take the other down. They'd just, kill each other. And, Fedor against Dan Henderson, you knew that was going to, exactly what happened. They'd just stand and bang until one clipped the other. So, you got to give it to Bellator. I don't really look at them as competition for the UFC, but they will, I think, try and make it as hard as they can and give people fights that aren't necessarily great fights, but fights that people will tune into. I don't even know if it's legal for a 51-year-old Shamrock to fight, but Bellator doesn't care. They're going to put him in there anyway, and maybe capture a live death on during sweeps weeks in June. So that's I don't even know what Bellator's schedule is. I think they just look at a UFC schedule and go, okay, we're going to try and fuck with them, and we're going to put a Friday card right before their big fight, just to try and steal some of their audience. So I think it's good overall. Bellator has better cards, more cards, just because I think competition is always good. And even though UFC is miles ahead of Bellator, I think it'll push them to, buying Bellator out eventually. I mean, you don't want to, going up against UFC is kind of like, when WCW was going against WWE, there is a model for you to be competitive against a company that's much bigger than you are. And I think you need four things. And I might have mentioned this on a previous podcast, maybe the Sting podcast I did, which was actually one of the more popular episodes of Inappropriate Earl, where I just spoke about Sting. And not the bass player from the Police, but the 55-year-old wrestler coming back. We'll cover that in a second. But there is a model to go up against the UFC, and that's what WCW did. You need four things. You need a short-term plan. You need a medium-range term plan. You need a long-term plan. And you also need the money to implement these plans. And in WCW's case, they had three out of the four things. Their short-term plan was brilliant. You sign all the older stars that people are familiar with, the Macho Mans, the Ric Flairs, the Hulk Hogans. You have a short-term plan, which was probably the greatest short-term plan and swerve ever in the pro wrestling business, which was turning Hulk Hogan bad guy, which was unthinkable at the time. That Hulk Hogan, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, clean shaven except for his mustache, and yellow and red outfits, goes to the dark side, grows a black beard, starts wearing all black, forms the NWO, and just dominated in the ratings. And then, once the NWO got a little stale, they still had, their midterm or mid-range plan, you could say, was the cruiserweight division. The Chris Benoits, the Eddie Guerreros, the Rey Mysterios, the Dean Malenkos, providing these Lance Storm to a degree, providing these great technical wrestling matches that would placate the people who actually tuned into wrestling to watch a good match. I don't know who does that, but but then their downfall, and they had Ted Turner's money. And Ted Turner could shit out what Vince McMahon makes in a day. They had no long-term plan, and that killed them. Because even with the enormous financial advantage that they had, once the cruiserweight thing got old and the NWO was, the NWO was old when fucking, Virgil and Horace Hogan were in it. They dropped the ball, and WWE took it and ran with it, and it's been a massive victory for them because they basically have no competition now. And I think Bellator is in a very similar position where they could at some point sign the big stars of the UFC when their contracts are up. Brock Lesnar is rumored to at least be considering Bellator. John Jones's contract comes up, he could say, hey, I'm going over to them. Really any champion's contract is up. They could all go over to Bellator. And, UFC would be have competition for probably the first time in a very long time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And, if you're an MMA fan, a lot of cards coming up. I don't know how many of them are good, but UFC 185 gets a A- in my book. And trust me, not a lot of recent cards have gotten a good grade from not just me, but most fans. And, I'm always a little scared. I think, Dana White's attitude seems to be, hey, if you don't like it, don't buy it. And, although I'm sure it's hard when you're in his position or the Fertittas, to hear fans bitching and complaining. I think the majority of most fans don't expect every card to be great and every fight to be like Mark Hunt and, Bigfoot Silva, where it's just 5-round bloodfest, guys just trading shots. But, you got to be careful, I think, with that attitude, because at some point people are going to start listening to you, Dana, and not buying your product. And, UFC numbers have gone down constantly. They might have seen a slight resurgence with the Rousey card, but You got to ask yourself how many people who bought the Rousey card are going to spend $60 again, or $50. Like DirecTV charges $10 extra if you want it in high def. But how many people from that fight are going to want to spend $50, $60 when the main event, really the only reason you bought the card, lasted 14 seconds? Now, I'm not saying Rousey should have carried the girl a couple rounds just to make people feel like they got their money's worth, but, $50, $60 is a lot of money to a lot of people who order these cards. If you spend that kind of money 2 to 3 times a month, that means a lot of these people can't buy their fucking Affliction shirts, which, by the way, I gave to homeless people. So if you're in the LA area and you see someone walking around with a Bedazzled Dragon Josh Barnett Affliction shirt, that came from my closet most likely. And I've been feeling pretty bad about that. When you're homeless, penniless, haven't had a meal in a couple of days, and you're destitute, thanks to me, I made your life that much worse by wearing an Affliction or Ed Hardy shirt. By the way, if you're in LA, that Ed Hardy outlet store in Melrose finally closed. I can't believe it, though. I mean, you think about it. An Ed Hardy outlet store, that's a store for people who wear Ed Hardy who don't want that shit. Like, that's a store where people who wear Ed Hardy walked into and go, oh, I don't think so. So I don't know who was buying that stuff, but apparently not enough people. So that's my UFC MMA talk. We're now going to get into a little bit of pro wrestling talk. It's a lead up to WrestleMania. Excuse me, I just took a sip from my... I'm not going to say the brand of energy drink that I drank because they don't pay me. So, my throat's a little parched. But we are 2 weeks out from WrestleMania, and, many of you know me. You know who my number one guy is in wrestling, and that is the great Steve Borden, otherwise known as Sting. And he is making his, not his WWE in-ring debut, I guess, but because he's debuted at Survivor Series, where he caused Triple H and the Authority the match when he walked out, and put Dolph Ziggler on top of Seth Rollins, and they, the Authority got kicked out, but then, of course, they came back, and then he also had a nice in-ring moment with Triple H at Fastlane, where they set up the singles match at WrestleMania. And it's going to, WrestleMania, I don't think I have recalled a WrestleMania that has as little attention as this one, at least 2 weeks out. And it's a pretty good card, to be honest with you. I mean, right now there's 7 matches. You've got Brock Lesnar with Paul Heyman versus Roman Reigns. And you got Sting and Triple H. You've got the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, which will probably be the bathroom break portion of the show for the crowd. And then you've got a kind of an interesting ladder match with Bad News Barrett, R-Truth, Dean Ambrose, Luke Harper, Dolph Ziggler, Stardust, and Daniel Bryan. I don't know how happy Dolph Ziggler and Daniel Bryan can be to be in that. And then you've got Rusev against John Cena. AJ Lee and Paige versus the Bella Twins, which will probably be bathroom break number 2. And probably as of at least right now, the most talked about, if you can use that phrase, match is The Undertaker's return against Bray Wyatt. Now, a lot of people thought The Undertaker and Sting would fight this year, but there were rumors of, let's just say, The Undertaker's health and physical appearance not being great, which have almost been substantiated by his not appearing on WWE TV, even for the build-up of this match. Although I will say Bray Wyatt has got some great promos, and I think that'll be a fun match. I'm sure Bray Wyatt will, for lack of a better word, job to The Undertaker and get The Undertaker back on a winning streak. Potentially setting up a match with Sting next year, which of course is in Texas, The Undertaker's home state. And, I think that will finally be the match that people want to see, Sting and The Undertaker, although I don't know if they should be wrestling by themselves. I mean, they're both, you talk about guys who have a lot of wrestling mileage on them. It'd have to be a very short match, 10 minutes or less, and I don't know if you want to have a 10 minutes or less match at WrestleMania, and I'm assuming a Sting and Undertaker match would be high up on the card, so I'd almost like to see them have either a Bray Wyatt or a Ziggler or a Rollins thrown into that match, so you can probably add another 5 minutes of whoever they choose to bump for Sting and The Undertaker. But we got to get through this year first, and I'm sure there'll be another match or two added. And by the way, in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle, as of now, and it's March 16th, you have The Miz, Curtis Axel, Ryback, Fandango, Adam Rose, Zack Ryder, Jack Swagger, Titus O'Neil, Darren Young, Big Show, Kane, Eric Rowan, Damian Mizdow, and Sin Cara. So I would say the septic system of the arena will be in full use when that match is going on. And, I don't know who's going to win that one. Although I do like Mizdow. He's pretty funny. And I'm sensing probably something goes down where maybe Miz and Mizdow are the final two. And, if you've been watching the WWE product, you'll know that Mizdow is actually getting more cheers than The Miz. So I'm sure that's going to set up for something down the road. But Sting and Triple H is really why I might even go to WrestleMania this year. I'm assuming Triple H will do the job for Sting, because you can tell in their, sketches or vignettes, whatever you want to call them, that Triple H very much respects Sting, and he's taken a couple hard Scorpion death drops to sell Sting as a badass. And I'm also assuming that there is no way that Sting is coming to the WWE and losing his first match. So it'll be interesting to see how they go with that. Be really interesting to see how Sting looks in a WWE ring. He at Survivor Series, he hit the referee Scott Armstrong and delivered a pretty hard Scorpion Death Drop on Triple H. And at Fastlane, he took a few shots from Triple H, nothing major, and then once again delivered a pretty nice Scorpion Death Drop that Triple H sold very nicely. So it's going to be interesting to see how he, moves. We haven't really seen him. The WWE's kind of covered him up, with the trench coat and the one-piece uni with the Scorpion on it. Although I will say, I'm very glad that they finally got his hair situation, fixed. If you saw him walk out during Survivor Series, and this hurts me to say this, man, but he had like 3 bald spots. One in the middle, 2 on the side. His hairline's pretty high up. I wouldn't say he has a receding hairline, but it's fairly high up. And they had the makeup stop like a little bit higher than the middle of his forehead. So he had like this weird gap between the hairline and the makeup. And I don't know, man. It kind of hurt me to see Sting, Surfer Sting, the Crow Sting with tons of hair fighting the hairline battle. You'd think the WWE would have checked it before they had him walk out on his first time ever. But I did notice that when he came out for Fastlane, they definitely had it, not comb over, but they fixed his bald spots as best they could. But I'm kind of curious to see, halfway through the match, what his hair is going to look like. I'm a Sting fan, so it kind of bums me out that, fuck, man, he's getting old. But we'll see what happens. And, and Raw's on tonight. few hours after this episode. So they better start moving on the build-up, though. He has no mainstream build-up, and I guess that's maybe due to The Rock not being involved. And so, they need something to, get mainstream media to talk about this. And, just WWE is kind of in a weird spot, rumors of Brock Lesnar, leaving to go back to the UFC, which I don't really understand. I mean, I'm assuming he makes more money doing wrestling than, fighting for real. I mean, I don't know who would want to fight for real in the UFC when you could, and although you take tremendous punishment in pro wrestling, I'd rather get a belly-to-belly suplex from Roman Reigns than take a liver kick again from Alistair Overeem. But, I think Lesnar's a competitive guy, and he probably was like, I want to go back there and kick ass. Because, his champion, he's got, I think, and a lot of people disagree with me on this, but, Brock Lesnar's UFC card, I think, is one of the best ever, because he basically only fought champions, and he beat most of them. I think his first MMA match was over in Japan, not necessarily a gimme fight, but, to get his feet wet. And then, he fought Heath Herring, who's, very, very, very tough dude, and he just ran through him. And then he fought Mir a few times, and, even though Mir beat him in the first fight, it was really a controversial loss because he was killing Mir. And then hit Mir, to the back of the head a little, but and the referee Mazzagatti stopped they did a restart, and then Mir got him in an ankle lock. But I've seen a lot worse hits to the head in MMA not get a restart. So I think Mir kind of lucked out there because he was well on his way to losing. And then you look at his other fights, Velasquez, Couture, Mir again, Overeem. He fought the who's who, and I don't think there's, I'll say this about the UFC, they definitely didn't hand him any gimme fights. You might say Herring, but, if Heath Herring's the worst fighter on your card, that's a good card. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Lesnar's match, because WWE's kind of in a pickle, because Roman Reigns, for whatever reason, is not over with the crowd. He's not very good on the mic right now. He's got a really bad gas tank. So he can't really have a great long match because he just, he's too muscular or he just has bad cardio. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. Just a couple weeks ago, Lesnar and Vince McMahon had a huge blow up on Raw, and Lesnar walked out of Raw that he was supposed to be on TV on. I kind of have a feeling that, Lesnar's WrestleMania match is the last one on his contract, which is leading to all this UFC speculation. And even Bellator has been thrown into the mix, which kind of makes sense for Lesnar if he went to Bellator, because, he'd probably kill every guy over there, and he wouldn't have to fight a lot. And, so that might be to his liking, and that reeks of a Scott Coker signing, steal Lesnar from the UFC and, have a pay-per-view with, say, Brock Lesnar against Kimbo Slice, which would be a complete squash match, but I think that would get some numbers because of idiots like me. I'd buy that shit for $60 in 2 seconds. And they'd layer that card with some real mismatches. They'd probably put the drummer of Def Leppard up against a Muay Thai champion. I love me some Scott Coker mismatches. Maybe get Bob Sapp and Hong Man Choi to, do something, and then, maybe have a women's fight, 2 pregnant chicks just beating the shit out of each other, stomach kicks. Don't put anything past Coker. Trust me on that one, folks. So, we'll see. That's an intriguing match for sure. Because if Lesnar wins, that probably means he's coming back to the WWE. And a lot of people have speculated, what Vince and Lesnar were arguing about is maybe Vince trying to convince Lesnar to come back one more time at a discount or whatever for that Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania, which if you watch wrestling, you know that's a great Raw because it basically wraps up the storylines from WrestleMania, and then you lead into, SummerSlam and the big summer season. So, it's going to be a very interesting WrestleMania. If you're a hardcore wrestling fan, I think it's an interesting one because it's if you follow wrestling, you're into the storylines, but they're going to have real trouble, getting casual fans into this because there's just, there's no reason for casual fans to tune in unless you have The Rock do something in the next 2 weeks, which is possible, but that's my road to WrestleMania build-up. Not a lot of interest, I think, in the Rusev-John Cena match. I mean, Cena right now is kind of like an 80s metal band in 97. They're there. And Rusev, although I like Rusev, kind of looks like a slightly chubbier version of Ted Arcidi, a strong man from back in the day. I don't know. It's for the U.S. Championship match, which, I don't know. Doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in that by the fans. And then, the tag team female match, I don't know. I actually think the Bella twins, I don't know, that Total Divas show is not the best. So, and the ratings are going down. The acting and the setups on Total Divas is the only thing worse than that is probably the setups on Comics Unleashed. And I love me some Byron Allen, but, when he tries to set the comics up for a joke, it's just the worst. So, Earl, I hear you like hockey. Well, yeah, that's because I told you in the pre-interview. So, I love Byron Allen, though. He used to live in the same, or his mom used to live in the same building as me. So I'd see him every now and then. And, I was a fan of his from Real People. So I would see him in the lobby, and we'd shoot the shit, and he'd kind of complain to me that no one was watching his show. And this is at the time when his show was on like ABC at like 5 in the morning on Sundays. And I'd be like, well, dude, one, you got a pretty rough time slot. Two, you're interviewing people like Toady from Facts of Life. So you might want to try and get some celebrities on there. And, I might seem a little bitter towards Comics Unleashed. And that's because I think I'm the only comic on earth who hasn't done it yet. That's actually my credit, is that I haven't done it. That's how I roll. That's how Daddy rolls. So, that's my road to WrestleMania. Hopefully something happens good in the next 2 weeks. And I'm going to end this podcast on, it's going to be, I think, kind of a new segment for me where, not every week, because usually when I have a guest, we don't have, a time constraints, where I can't do this, but every now and then I'm going to expose you to a movie or a band that I like. And, maybe a movie or a band that, was overlooked for whatever reasons. And today I'm going to start this segment with one of my favorite movies of all time. And it came out in 1986. And it's a highly overlooked movie because a movie of a somewhat similar storyline came out like a year later in 1987 called Fatal Attraction, which did huge box office. And just kind of, I'll never understand why this movie that came out a year earlier didn't do as well. And it's a movie called 52 Pickup. And it just had such a great pedigree in this film. Directed by legendary director John Frankenheimer. Starring the great Chief Brody from Jaws, Roy Scheider, who I think is one of the most underlooked actors of all time. His movies he did in the 70s were amazing. And, of course, the female lead in this was Anne Margaret. She fucked Elvis, man. That's all that needs to be said. And looking pretty good in this movie, too. And speaking of looking good, kind of a bit part in this movie, but pretty good bit part was Vanity, right before she found God. That was key. They got her before she found God. And just a fantastic cast. The bad guy in this movie, another criminally underrated actor, John Glover. And, out here in LA, you see a lot of acting workshops, comedy workshops, taught by people who you never heard of before, which always just made me want to go insane when you have an acting class taught by an actor you've never heard of before. If there was a class on how to act like a bad guy, John Glover should teach it, because he was just fantastic in this movie as kind of the swarmy, sleazy, good-looking leader of the pack, if you will, of the bad guys, who were played by the inimitably great Clarence Williams III, as a kind of cracked-out maniac, and the often underrated Robert Trebor, who played like the nervous, Jewy bad guy. It's just a great chemistry between these three. Super funny, and just a great. And Kelly Preston played a relatively small part in this movie, and she was great as the young starlet who got roped into the porn world. And it's an Elmore Leonard novel, and so you think Frankenheimer, Elmore Leonard, Roy Scheider, Anne Margaret. Why this movie? And it was done by Yoram Globus and Menahem Golan, who just, if you watched movies in the mid '80s, those kind of chic-y 80s movies, they also were responsible for another film that came out in 1986, The Delta Force, with Chuck Norris. And I always see the bad guy from the Delta Force, Robert Forster, walking around my neighborhood. And, that's why I love living in L.A., because where else in L.A. could you be walking your dog and fist bump the bad guy from Delta Force? And he's always a good sport when I see him. Although he looks at me like, oh, my God, that's the guy who's going to ask me about Delta Force. So, but getting back to 52 Pickup, I mean, also Ron Jeremy as a cameo. And here's what I love about that is in the credits for 52 Pickup, Ron Jeremy's name is listed as Ron Jeremy Hyatt. Like, he's going to fool people into thinking he's someone different. Like, someone's going to look at him and go, oh, hey, who's that Ron Jeremy Hyatt guy? That's not the same Ron Jeremy I know. But he had a very small part in it. But this is a great movie. Basically, the plot is Roy Scheider is cheating on Anne Margaret with Kelly Preston. And it's all a setup by John Glover, Clarence Williams III, and Robert Trebor. They're going to get him on tape sleeping with Kelly Preston. They're going to blackmail him because Anne Margaret in the movie is running for office. And they want $120,000 from Roy Scheider, and he says, I can only get you $52,000, hence the name 52 Pickup. And it's just all the actors had just great chemistry in this movie. And if you like just a good sleazy drama, mid 80s plot, I think it holds up still, because the acting's good. And, for some, and a lot of people have said, movie reviewers, that the reason maybe the film didn't do as well is it was kind of a dark movie set around the porn world, but there really wasn't a lot of graphic scenes, I guess, and I hope I'm not, I'll spoil the film, because you're probably not going to watch the film anyway, so, really, the only graphic scenes were when they killed Kelly Preston. And even that scene showed the brilliance of John Glover, because he's just, they basically make a snuff film when they kill her. And when Roy Scheider says he's not going to pay them, they kidnap Roy Scheider and show him the snuff film. And John Glover is acting like he's a film critic as they show him Roy Scheider the snuff film. And it's really funny and real sleazy. And it's really, you owe it to yourself to watch 52 Pickup. I do think they have a special edition DVD with not necessarily deleted scenes, but maybe some commentary, which is always good. And I'll leave you guys with kind of a. I'll kill two birds in one stone. I'll talk about one more movie because it's got not necessarily a similar storyline, but 1982. I have another. I've always gravitated towards character actors. Obviously, movies are made with guys like Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks and Tom Byron. Just kidding. That's for you porn lovers. And I've always appreciated character actors, and one of my favorite character actors of all time is the great Wings Hauser, and who in 1982 did a very sleazy movie called Vice Squad, and where he played the sadistic pimp Ramrod. And it's kind of along the lines of 52 Pickup, a very dark storyline. Basically the cops are chasing Ramrod to catch him. He's beating up all these prostitutes and he's going on a killing spree. He's a real badass. And probably one of the greatest scenes in movie history is when Ramrod, Wings Hauser, breaks into the great Fred Berry's apartment. And if you're wondering who Fred Berry is, it's not Ken Berry. It's Rerun from What's Happening, who in Vice Squad was playing the sugar pimp Dorsey. Not Yorsey from the Comedy Store, but Dorsey. And Wings Hauser cuts his balls off with the scissors. And it's a real good scene. Just see Vice Squad for that, and you will be happy. And that's just another reason why I miss the 80s, is for movies like Vice Squad and 52 Pickup. Also another really fun movie in 1984 that came out was Angel, with the incredibly beautiful Donna Wilkes from Jaws 2, which Roy Scheider was in, of course. Interesting story about Jaws 2, if I can get into Roy Scheider for a minute, is he was scheduled to be in The Deer Hunter. Want to say he was supposed to play Michael, which was, I believe, De Niro's part in Deer Hunter, and he had done pre-production for 2 weeks on the film, and then due to a contract dispute with I don't know if it was Sony, but whatever film company, he wanted to get out of his contract to do Deer Hunter. They said no, and basically kind of forced him to do Jaws 2. And so that would, I've always been a fan of, what if this person played that part in this particular movie. And, I love Roy Scheider as an actor. And, I would have loved to seen him in Deer Hunter because I think he would have done a great job. I mean, that's a great movie. You look at the cast from Deer Hunter, man. That's a killer cast. John Savage, I almost said Rutger Hauer, but, Christopher Walken, De Niro, just some great character actors in that as well. And, Roy Scheider, and I think that was a huge halt to his career, because after that he did I think Blue Thunder, which is kind of a cool movie, but he never really seemed to get in a big movie after that. Then he was in Sequest, so you often wondered how that affected his career, and there's a lot of cool stories like that in the 80s, specifically about certain actors auditioning for parts. Like even in the late 70s, there's some great YouTube screen tests of the original Star Wars cast. Like William Katt from Greatest American Hero auditioned to be Luke Skywalker, and that's on there. Perry King, who was a very good-looking, successful actor around that time, he auditioned for Han Solo. I think Christopher Walken auditioned for Han Solo. Glenn Turney, for you fans of The Wire, the Mayor Royce from The Wire, was very close to becoming Han Solo. So that would have been weird, or cool, whatever you want to say, to have a black Han Solo, which might have explained why original drawings of the Millennium Falcon had a dub sticker on the back. What the fuck? And John Travolta was originally supposed to be Richard Gere's part in American Gigolo, as well as Officer and a Gentleman. So I think Richard Gere has a lot to be thankful for to John Travolta. Those were two pretty big roles for Gere that kind of catapulted him into superstardom, while John Travolta was making that movie with Lily Tomlin, and also the great Staying Alive, which I think Sylvester Stallone directed. And I'm sure Frank Stallone got his mitts in the ring on that one too. It's gotta be tough if you're Frank Stallone, man. You're fucking, your brother's one of the biggest actors of all time. I'm not saying greatest actors, although I don't think he's as bad of an actor as people, kind of seem to, throw at him. And you still can't work. You still can't get work in this business. I mean, if my brother was Sylvester Stallone, I would at least get an extra part in Cobra or something. I don't know. But, I think Frank Stallone's more famous for, Norm Macdonald making fun of him than he is for his acting and stuff. So, if you're a casting director out there, someone give Frank Stallone some work. Come on, baby. So this has been, I think, a pretty fun episode for me to do. It's hard to talk an hour straight. So I hope you are interested in this. And I'm going to go to my favorite gay gym in the world right now, Equinox. And I probably shouldn't say their name because they're not paying me. But Equinox in West Hollywood, it's heaven on earth, man, because where else can you work out next to Fabio and see his commercial play on in the background? It's like 3D. And if you've listened to this podcast and if you've listened to me on other people's podcasts, you'll also know that the steam room stories from Equinox, that's a whole nother show. I don't want to bore you with those stories again, but I try and fly low and avoid the radar in the steam room at this gym. But this has been a fun episode. So in closing, please rent, buy on Amazon 52 pickup. You'll love it. And if you're really into I'm going to start like an Earl flicks. Vice Squad with Wings Hauser. I forgot to mention about Vice Squad. Playing the lead prostitute in that movie is Kurt Russell's ex-wife, Susan Hubley, who had a cool scene in Escape from New York with Kurt Russell. A lot of people don't know this, but when Kurt Russell went into the abandoned building and Susan Hubley's like, "Yeah, you're Snake Plissken. All right." That was his ex-wife. So, of course, Kurt Russell killed it in the hockey movie Miracle as Herb Brooks. Really captured his essence. And I will leave you with, I don't know the exact name of the documentary, but it's a 30 for 30 on the Miracle on Ice. But it tells not the U.S. side of the story, which we all know, but it tells the Russian side of the story and how devastating that loss was to them. And I still don't think, and I was talking about this with a friend the other day, how great of a victory that was in America. I mean, basically, you had a group of players from the U.S. who were fresh out of high school, right into college, playing a Russian all-star team of seasoned pros. I mean, it's not like, most Olympic sports at the time where it's all amateurs. This would be the equivalent of freshmen and sophomores in college beating the Lakers. Well, they probably could beat the Lakers this year, but, this would be the equivalent of a team of, freshmen and sophomores beating the Super Bowl champions. It was just an unbelievable victory, not just for U.S. sports, but just for underdog in any sports of any era. I don't think you'll ever see something like that happen again. It was just an unbelievable way to start off a decade that's probably the best decade for the U.S., the 80s. And but the story of the Russian side of things was never really told. Just a devastating loss for that country too. Especially, you got to understand, this was right around, the Cold War still pumping, and threats of war constantly between the U.S. and Russia. And I think this victory by the U.S. actually helped stop a world war, and I'm not kidding. I mean, I think the Russian side, after you watch this documentary, and I'm going to look up the name of the documentary. I think it's called Miracles of Men. I might be off on that, but it's on Netflix, and it totally deflated a country. And you wouldn't think a sporting event would, stop a world war, but I think Bayou, the U.S. side, yes, it's 30 for 30. It's called The Miracles of Men. So watch that on Netflix. It's a fascinating look at the other side of things, which basically you've never heard until now. And those 30 for 30s are awesome, man. Bernie and Ernie, about Bernard King and Ernie Grunfeld, that's a great one. I mean, I've not seen a bad 30 for 30, even on sports or subjects that I'm not necessarily interested in. Like the two Escobars was great, and I'm not really a big soccer guy, but that's a great one, and so many. So there's a lot of good stuff on TV nowadays. Documentaries. Thank God for Netflix, because regular TV sucks. I mean, that NBC show Allegiance was canceled after like 2 episodes, and I remember watching it going, this just looks like the rejected scripts that the Americans gave them, and there's so many it's like State of Affairs, which is doing pretty good in the ratings, but they just seemed like they were running on rejected scripts of Homeland. So by the way, please check out the video season 5 preview of Homeland with me and Whitney Lee Rice on YouTube. It's really funny. I play Saul, she plays Carrie, and she knocks it out of the park. So that is, I guess that's it for episode 56. Sorry I couldn't get a guest for you, but sometimes it's hard to get people to come down here. I got a few guests coming, but they couldn't come this week. And thank you guys all for the support. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, and certainly a lot that get bigger names than I do, and get much bigger audiences. But I really do this for you guys. You guys have been great to me. The support. You know where you can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes. Please leave a review on iTunes if you have the time. It really helps. Obviously the goal with this podcast is to get featured along the likes of Rogan's podcast, Joe Rogan Experience, which is a great podcast. He has a lot of cool guests. Mark Maron's, Chris Hardwick's. I mean, it's, once I get in with the big dogs, bigger name guests will say, oh, I'll do this guy's podcast too. So, that is it for now. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's just Earl Skakel, EARLSKAKEL. And thank you guys very much for the support. I do it all for you, and I'm at the Comedy Store a lot. If you're in LA, come see me at the Comedy Store and other places, but the Comedy Store is my home base of operation. And you can just call there and, ask to find out when Earl is playing. The number there is 323-650-6268. But don't call there and say like, oh, I want to see the greatest comic of all time, Earl. You got to play it cool. Act like you've been there before. Otherwise it's too obvious and I won't get any spots because you ham and eggers are trying to, bump me up too fast. You got to do it on the DL. Of course, I'm telling you to do it on the DL, giving the Comedy Store's phone number on my podcast. So thank you guys very much. Earl Skakel checking out episode 56 of Inappropriate Earl. See ya!